Started, Jason? Great.
Yep, recording's going, so we're all being recorded now.
Okay, so first thing I wanted to say is thank you all for being here. I understand this is it's every time's busy time for most of the folks in this room, but being the start of the school year now behind us and moving through the transitions that we're in, I appreciate everybody maybe able to make time to come this evening. I know several of you have already expressed interest. You have other standing commitments and other obligations that are going on that are equally as important, and you're going to be stepping away. So thank you very much for that heads up. What you'll notice is that in the chat, we're taking attendance there, so we're not going to do a roll call. If you are a member of the work group, we just ask that you put, somewhere either in here your name or near your name that you're present. And we are recording this. That will also serve as a backup for that as well. Jason, if you want to advance the slide to...
Sure, but one note, if you are indicating your attendance in the chat, please do so publicly to everyone because private messages don't get recorded.
Okay.
And the recording is how I'm going to be doing that. Also,
Great.
Members of the public, please also give your name so that I can keep track of you folks as well.
Great. Thanks, Jason.
Thank you.
So we have our meeting norms. We are asking that as Zoom etiquette, you mute yourself when not talking and use the chat function to raise questions, or unmute yourself and kind of raise your hand or try to get into someone's attention. There's several people on the work group here. People are not afraid to speak up and say someone has a question. When you do speak, please identify yourself. Again, as Jason has indicated, this meeting is being recorded and will be posted for the public. There will be a public comment section at the end. We've allocated 10 minutes for public comment. If you are interested in making a public comment, we ask that you make a note of that in the chat, and Jason will be sure to recognize you when we get to that session on that portion of the agenda. Can skip right over that. Here are the minutes from the previous meeting, and I can't recall the last time. Do we approve these minutes, or are these just minutes? Just so you know, the minutes are in the on the website for the Writing Consortium. Strongly, suggest that everybody be mindful of that and check those out if you need to. But you also get these minutes regularly right after the meeting, within usually several days after Jason sends out the minutes. I think that is it for that. Jason, did you post them in the chat? Did you get them in there?
Yeah, I'm fighting with that, but I will be posting it in a second.
Okay. All right, great. All right, so at this point, I want to kind of get just back to our charge and what is in front of this work group. And we've spent a lot of time talking about that in the last two sessions. So, Ray, I want to ask you if you would, kind of kick this off for us, like what the charge that we're here to do. And then we have this notion of how we're going to be different. And, you spoke eloquently to that the last time. I think it'd be great if you kind of kick us off today.
Thank you, Jeff. So our charge is to examine strategies, partnerships, and innovative approaches to better the outcomes for school-age students, well, actually more than school-age students, birth through graduation from high school, and to take a particular look at those strategies that are working or have a promise of being effective best practices in the areas related to academics, but that impact academics, but outside of the academic sphere. And so those factors that are strong influencers on student outcomes that are related to our ecosystem, some refer to as social determinants for success, Our charge is primarily for Wilmington students. The legislation says the scope of this work is concentrated on Wilmington students and Northern Newcastle County. And so the question that is an ongoing question, we're not daring to be different just for the sake of being different, but how are we going to go about making a set of actionable items that would go to the full rating consortium and subsequently to the General Assembly that would lead us on the path to improvements. That's our charge as I understand it. I'm sure others can add to that.
There are teachers who get a joke as will you, and they just get paid for it. You've got to be kidding me.
I have no idea what that is.
Okay, yeah, so Jeff just stepped away, but the next thing is Matt running us through the update of the Reading Consortium.
I'll do that. Thank you, Jason. So I'll give you a quick update on the Reading Consortium, and Senator Lockman was on the line. She can obviously jump in as well and try to talk about our timelines and how that affects our agenda here in our work group. The consortium has a standing responsibility to make recommendations to the Governor and General Assembly to achieve educational equity and improve the educational outcomes of pre-K to grade 12 students. And based on how things are going in terms of timelines with the various working groups in the consortium, it's likely going to be sometime next calendar year before there's any full set of recommendations that are forthcoming. But as we discussed at our last meeting, we're also coming up on a really critical window of time this year when the Governor and General Assembly are going to be setting their budget priorities for the upcoming legislative session. So Senator Lockman and I are very focused on trying to get some interim recommendations from the consortium to the Governor and to the General Assembly by this December, because that's when the Governor starts putting his proposed budget together. We want to make sure that to the extent that the state does have funds available to spend, that we make some interim recommendations that are going to benefit students who are facing barriers of race and poverty, so that those recommendations can be front and center when funding decisions are getting made. There have been some really admirable statements from a number of elected officials in the state over the last several months about wanting to help students that are facing barriers of race and poverty. And we want to make sure that we've given them our best advice about how they can most effectively do that. So December is a very ambitious timeline, but I think that it is one that we are on track to meet. And a number of members of this working group have spent some time since our last meeting starting to put together a proposed list of interim recommendations. And we're going to be spending much of the meeting tonight getting input from the entire working group on some of those proposed recommendations. And then between tonight and the full consortium's meeting in December, so we're talking about October and November, our goal is going to be to continue adding details to these interim recommendations so that we can present a final proposal to the full consortium in December that's detailed and thoughtful and persuasive, and hopefully that the consortium can then take those recommendations and send them on to the Governor and the legislature. And finally, just looking at that timeline, looking at that goal, one of the challenges that we're going to face as a working group is trying to set our own internal priorities for interim recommendations. And you've had a chance to see some of the work that Jason has circulated from some of the members. It's excellent work. Some of it is also likely to be expensive. And expensive is fine. I can't think of anything that's more important to spend money on than educating our kids. But we've discussed at past meetings that making help for students that are facing barriers of race and poverty should be a first priority. So in terms of thinking through interim recommendations that we might make moving forward, I think that focus is going to be very important. And my hope for the discussion tonight is that we can give our members who are working on these issues between meetings some of our best input on what they've come up with so far, so that they can go back and start to add some details to what they've come up with so far. Thanks, Jeff.
Thanks, Matt. You said you were going to stay under 8 minutes, and you did. That was impressive. I mean, don't mean to call you out like that, but thank you. So our next portion of our meeting is really going to be some small group report outs. And, you know, we've kind of jumbled this around a couple of different ways, but Dr. Harrison has about 13 more minutes with us. Perhaps we could flip the script a little bit and let him talk a little bit about the work that they've been doing in their group, and then we can pick back up with the partnerships that go back to the original spot in the agenda, if everyone's good with that. Does that sound all right with you, Dr. Harrison? Is he still here?
Yes, I am. Sorry, I was muted.
Are you good with that? Giving us a few minutes of kind of overview of your document, where you are, and then
overview, absolutely. And then anyone who wants to provide feedback, I didn't include my email in there, but I'm sure that Jason could help you get access to me if you have any thoughts. So
Great.
You want me to just go over highlights?
Yeah, Jason, why don't you bring up if you hyperlink to the draft, just kind of put it up on the screen, and then I think Jason can do that by clicking on, it looks like he made that a hyperlink. Get it up on the screen, and then go ahead and just start talking and sharing your highlights. Yeah.
Sure. All right, so why is this important? It's important because the inequities that we see in our city, in our state, all through the country, can be attributed to racism and not race, and it can be attributed to racism because racism presents itself not just in the hearts of people, and I'm very less interested in what's in people's hearts, but really interested in what exists in the culture that people experience and see, and also interested in the way that racism shows up in the policies that we implement. Like we talked about, it's really critical to understand that for a policy to be racist, it does not have to intend to harm a group. It just has to have the impact of creating or maintaining advantage for those who already have advantage while disadvantaging others. And so in order to dismantle and disrupt racism, we really have to, in the educational system, focus on how does individual racism, cultural racism, or institutional practices and policies that promote or cement racial advantage, how can we dismantle and disrupt that? All right, knowing that racism not only harms people, but it also robs them of opportunity for education, for health, and for life. Success looks like equity. I think if we are going to talk about racial justice and how we implement policies towards racial justice, then equity looks like what happens when Black and Hispanic students have the same access, the same opportunities, and the same resources available to them as their white counterparts. I apologize, I made the font a little smaller and the margins a little wider to fit this on one page. And so success looks like acknowledging the historical disadvantages, acknowledging the current harmful practices and structures that we have, and then intentionally investing. Intentional investment means that we are being really clear that this investment is meant to correct historical harm that has been implemented on communities of color, particularly Black communities and also Hispanic communities are the primary ones who have suffered in our educational system. And so what do the components look like? We need data. We cannot move forward without good enough information because we can't evaluate unless we have the data across everything. And so that's just broad. And so if you have ideas of what kinds of data would be important, or you have knowledge of the people out there who are already collecting data, we can just add sources so we can collate. Access. And again, poverty should not be a barrier for families having either internet. This is something, that I deal with families who, simply just don't have the internet or the technology to have their children have equitable education. And also the other things that are going to be considered social determinants if we don't have food, safety, clothing, etc. Also, poverty shouldn't be a barrier, although it is for any of those supportive services that help to support optimal academic performance. And so if we have a certain portion of the population whose students have access to tutoring, SAT prep, ACT prep, et cetera, and others don't, and the barrier is poverty and race, then we should have policies to correct that. Of course, we have to look at the curriculum, and we have to see what's included and what's erased from the curriculum. The content has to, we cannot be anti-racist unless we directly address race. And I know that, we have some, federal guidance to the opposite, but I believe that if we want to have racial justice, we must boldly and consistently address race. And also students should be able to see themselves represented in the curriculum materials. We need to look at the culture of the schools and our school systems and our districts and our leadership, from the buildings to the walls to the facilities to what celebrations get observed or do not get observed. So it requires equitable investment. And again, that goes back to number one, which is data. We need to know where are the inequities so that we can have equity. Inclusion looks like the way that we recruit, the way that we support, the way that we promote Black and Hispanic personnel. And this is not only for schools that have predominantly minoritized communities, because if you are in a predominantly white school, you should also have teachers and administrators and leaders who are Black and Hispanic. But there's data that says that Black students perform better when they have Black instruction. And so particularly in schools that have Hispanic and Black students, we should make sure that the staff, that the teaching staff and the support staff is representative, that is inclusion. Training and development. We talked about partnerships with educational institutions. If we're going to train and develop, we should be aware of the role that bias plays, the role that bias plays in how teachers attend to students, how teachers discipline students, how administrators attend and discipline. If we don't have enough, staff, we need to invest in pipeline programs to create more staff. When we are thinking about hiring and promoting people, we should hire and promote for diversity. So if someone is not showing any history of inclusion, no history of empowering people from marginalized populations, no history of promoting people of color, this is not someone who should be elevated to the leadership of any structure within our educational system. And then we also have a focus on racial justice requires healing, and that's robust mental health support. That's having culturally adaptive services. That's having services that address racial trauma and race-based stress. Right now we have entire populations of young people who are really stressed in the events of things like, seeing another shooting of an innocent Black person with Breonna Taylor where there are no charges. Healing involves looking at these disparities in discipline for Black and brown students, dismantling the school to prison pipeline, revising discipline practices, and then finally thinking about the way that we engage families and communities, understanding that for many families of color, they live in family systems that have caregivers who might not be biological parents. And so the way that we send out communication, the way that we have people complete applications, it could actually be, we just need to be mindful of the ways that family present. And so we aren't sending communications that says, that exclude caregivers. And we also have policies that allow all invested caregivers to be able to participate on behalf of the students that they're invested in. And so of course, none of this is expensive, and the motivation to intentionally provide investments to correct historical disadvantage is not always high. But if we want to achieve racial justice, these are some of the steps that we're thinking about. I'll stop.
I gotta say, impressive. You used your time very efficiently there, Dr. Harrison. Thank you very much. That was a great summary of the document. I know you only have a couple more minutes before you have to head to your next meeting. Is there anything that you wanted to add that you didn't get time to squeeze in, or to
try to keep it on one page, but I am very open. Like I said, you can reach out to me directly if there are like additional thoughts or additional comments. Please just go ahead. My email is pretty easy, so it's just roger.harrison, like my name, @nemours.org. So reach out to me directly if you have thoughts. Thank you so much, Jason. If you have thoughts, and I appreciate your time.
Thank you, Dr. Harrison. Really appreciate it. And if anybody who's not in a work group or in one of our smaller groups, and this is in your wheelhouse and you're interested, please make sure you also reach out to Dr. Harrison to get involved. I'm not sure if everybody, where everybody landed on our last round of conversations, but it's an opportunity for you to get involved. And again, I'm not trying to cut off this presentation. To be real clear, I did know going into this that Dr. Harrison said he had to leave at 5:30. So
I've got to be at 5:30.
I don't feel like we're rushing you off the stage.
No, thank you for allowing me to be first.
Yeah. Okay. Great. So Jason, can we slide back up to that? There you go. School and community partnerships. We have another one pager, and I believe this was Tamara. Is it Tamara?
You got it right, Tamara.
Tamara, there you go. I got it. All right, Tamara. Tamara Smith. That's what I thought. I got. All right, good for me. Got it right. Jason, if you want to bring up her one pager, and then Tamara, you have the floor to kind of review, and you might get a few more questions than Dr. Harrison because you didn't say you had anywhere to be at 5:45.
That is not it, but I have it next to me.
It's the other. That's the next one, Jason. You might have the link to the wrong one in there, Jason. This is the early childhood one. No, let me see if I can. I'm not able to share. There we go.
Perfect. Thank you. Hello and good evening, everyone. I submitted on behalf of our group just an overall proposal of thinking about the wraparound services in school and nonprofit partnerships. So why this is important, I think we all know that not all barriers for students caused by race and poverty can be addressed by what happens in the classroom. I think that's one of the more critical components that is lost sometimes when we talk about equity and access, is the narrative and the story that if we just only have high-performing schools, high-performing teachers, high-performing school leaders, that will alone close the gap and allow for access for kids. That is a huge component of it, but it is very much not the only piece when we're thinking about the development of a child holistically. So what does success look like when we're thinking about tackling all of the challenges and the obstacles that exist outside of the classroom? It would mean that students facing barriers caused by race or poverty have all of the support that they need outside of a traditional school day, including the academic instruction, and that we're doing all that we can to ensure that the student is reaching their full potential, but also creating the environments that allow for like authentic play and curiosity and thought that is often restricted or removed to underserved children. And to give some more color to that, what we see many times, but not all the time, is when we're talking about closing the achievement gap or just even academic success, things that are taken out that have been a part of our own academic path in life, whether it's the arts, creative writing, other things that allow for a child to really think and grow and prosper and develop in a different way, not just if they are proficient in a subject area. So we think that's also equally important, that we're, again, like not only creating the spaces and the places for strong academic achievement, but also allowing for the just natural curiosity and play for a child to happen as well. So what are the components of a successful program? The big one is there are no obstacles for students to participate, which means no cost to families for transportation and actually being a part of the program. Programming will actually be available at the beginning of the school day and also after the school day and through the summer. Next, looking to maximize opportunities that involve community partners. Again, looking at it from the community and the village perspective of not recreating the wheel. There are lots of agencies and programs that specialize in very specific work that we could partner with and have them lead certain aspects of work. Next is looking at the staffing at the school level to ensure that the services are properly coordinated and that goals are clearly established and reinforced through the services. Next, which is a big one, is stable and skilled leadership for the programs, including adequate compensation, so that we can attract and retain skilled professionals to oversee the programs. We have some amazing folks who do critical work in after-school programs, before-school programs, supplemental programs during the summer, and they are able to see success. And for many of them, they would love to stay and continue to do the work. But when there is a very low bar as far as pay is concerned, it's hard to attract and retain the talent that's needed to create these robust and real programs. Next, having an emphasis on Black and Hispanic leadership in the programming staffing as well. Next, also looking at mental health and general health as well, and other wellness programs provided in the school, and looking at very specific training for school-based personnel on racial and cultural issues that are important to all of the services for students. As always, rigorous evaluation of the programming of an ongoing basis, including getting evaluation not just from from a metric perspective, but also hearing from parents and community members and school partners, ensuring that the partnerships are working and students are being served and meeting their needs in an ever-changing world. Next, proper balance between academic support for students, coordinated with their classroom instruction, and opportunities for students to pursue, again, other non-academic goals and skills. For younger students, the opportunity to have high school age mentors and role models. And then lastly, ensuring that the community, family, and youth voices are a critical component of the design of the program, as well as the evaluative process. What's needed? Money, 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 as always. Financial resources are always needed to help support the salaries, training, ongoing training. I would also add ongoing training constantly, transportation, program evaluation, stipends, and then the cost for reimbursements for third-party agencies. And that is our memo. I know I talk pretty fast, so please let me know if there's anything I can restate, clarify, or questions I can answer.
Floor is open. I mean, if anybody does have any questions, we've allocated some time for Q&A at the conclusion of the small group breakouts. And I know we had this one in advance, so several of us were able to read this in advance of the meeting. Okay. Great. Well, thank you very much, Tamara. It was great. Really appreciate the work, and we know that it's going to continue ongoing as we already, as we pick up the charge at the conclusion of this meeting with the items that you have listed here, and really refining it and prioritizing. Next.
I do have a comment. I'm sorry.
Yep.
This is Tika Hartsack.
Okay.
I was wondering if there was also any thought about maybe connecting that with DCRAC, Delaware Reinvest Action Council. So talking about these partnerships and how to finance some of these activities for people in the community. I know Rashmi works very closely with the different businesses here, as you know, being in Delaware and some of their tax breaks, they do have responsibility back to the community. So I wanted to offer as a possible suggestion to talk with her, or even bring her in about some of those options that you were just mentioning.
Thank you so much, Tika. And you were kind of breaking up in the beginning, but then I heard DCRAC and Rashma. So I think you were saying.
Sorry.
No, it's fine.
I'm on
it's
my
fine.
phone, which I'm normally not. I'm usually connected to a computer. But yes, and I can send you her contact information too, just to have further conversations about maybe possible partnerships or other, or if not, I know she's a wealth of information and can possibly outsource it to someone else.
Absolutely. Thank you so much for that.
Hopefully I didn't break
Keep
up
on that.
We got that one. Thank you, Tika. Hearing no other comments or questions, I see Tamara's put her email address in the chat. So if anybody, yes.
This is Kim Williams.
Yep. Hey, Kim.
Hi. So thank you so much for both of these presentations, were excellent. But I just wanted to comment, the wellness centers. DHSS is currently doing a strategic plan right now, looking at the wellness centers in the state. And we could probably, you might want to reach out to them and maybe talk about some of the things that you suggested in your document, so maybe they can include them now. So I just wanted to point that out. Thank you. Great work too. Thank you.
Thanks, Kim. And I think any other, I just got, all right. So before we leave this session, I did just get a private chat from Jason that we do need to approve the minutes from the last meeting. So we can finish that at the end. I just want to say that publicly so I don't forget, because I know we'll get engaged in the conversation like we did last time when we ran long and everyone was like ready to bug out. So I don't want everybody anybody to forget that. So that said, Jason, you want to just go ahead right to the next slide and let's keep working with the presentations. Let's keep the momentum going. And we have the Holistic Child Development Group, and I think Dawn Alexander is going to be sharing.
Yes, and what I did, Jason, may I share my screen? What I did is I took all the information that we gathered and just put them into a handful of slides.
Great. That's a technical question for Jason to share the ability for you to get that. I don't think, I'm not a co-host. There you go.
Great. Well, thank you so much. What we have here, let's see. So I took the information that we gathered and put it all into just a handful of slides. So looking at early childhood, holistic child development, we are that work group. And there are a lot of reasons why we need to focus on early childhood development and education. We are the social determinants of health work group. And when we look at the information, there's extensive information from the CDC, but I wanted to point out that when we look at early childhood ed, the CDC recognizes early childhood education and early childhood services as one of the key needs to address social determinants of health. That when families have access to high quality early education, high quality early services, the outcomes not only benefit children, the benefits, the families are benefited as well as the entire community. So there is a great deal of information on the CDC's website, but I wanted to point that out to everyone, and you certainly can visit that website to learn more. And then, so why do we need to focus on early childhood, holistic child development? Many of the barriers caused by systematic racism impact children well before they enter kindergarten. We know this. Those of us working in the early childhood field, we know that if we wait until kindergarten to provide the kind of supports that children and families need, we've waited too long. So we need to ensure that every child in Delaware has the opportunity to succeed, and that we begin when mothers are pregnant. So we're supporting pregnant moms, we're supporting children ages birth through 5, and we're supporting their families or their support systems, be it mom, dad, aunt, uncle, grandmom, caregiver. We are supporting the whole system. And then there is extensive research demonstrating why we need to focus on birth to 5, why waiting until age 5 in kindergarten is too late. So some of those links are here, and they're also in the documents that were shared with all of you. So I talked to Matt the other day, and we were trying to, and speaking with Tika also, we were trying to look at what are the things for which we need to advocate that require policy changes to Delaware code, regulations, and then what are the kinds of things that for which we can advocate now, things that don't require policy changes or don't require changes in Delaware code, but they do require changes in mindset. They require us to collaborate with people who maybe previously with whom we've not collaborated or we haven't thought about collaborating. So looking at, these are examples of some of these statewide changes. The preschool development grant, Delaware received that grant over a year ago, which funded an extensive needs assessment in Delaware, looking at birth to 5 systems, programs, et cetera. Based on that needs assessment, recommendations have been made and an early childhood strategic plan will be released. We're hearing it's now in October, released from the governor's office. Those recommendations are extensive and comprehensive and really address a lot of the concerns that we would be addressing in our work group and in Reading Consortium. So once that is released, we as a work group and we as a consortium will be able to really look through those and highlight the ones that align, and many of them do. Some of those things within some of the recommendations are moving IDEA Part C, so the early intervention work of birth to 3, moving that out of DHSS and into DOE, and there's work being done now to draft that legislation, ensuring that all early childhood programs participate in Delaware STARS. So for families, it reduces the burden of searching for a quality program when they are able to view the quality level of every child care program. Looking at purchase of care, so increasing the reimbursement rate and looking at the market rate study. So we're ensuring that child care programs are properly reimbursed for offering high quality services. Delaware STARS, the revisions are being done now, so making sure that we are providing feedback for that revision. Looking at wellness centers, so we mentioned wellness centers earlier, and Dr. Menzer, you're quite familiar with this. We worked for a long time to try to open a wellness center in our preschool program, and then because DHSS, there's now a moratorium on opening new wellness centers in elementary and preschool. That has been a challenge for us because we know that families need to access, they need access to physical health, mental health services, but they're not able to through wellness centers. And then looking at developmental screening in all child cares and offering vision and hearing screening, attendance, registration, and data. So all those systems right now are separate, and it's very difficult for childcare, school districts. It's difficult for us to collaborate in that way because our data systems are not linked. Looking at overall screenings through pediatricians' offices, wellness centers, preschools, transportation continues to be a challenge in the early learning world, and then certainly funding formulas. So those are the things that we need to look at for statewide changes, but then there are things that we can look at right now. So the kinds of partnerships that we've established with things like readiness teams, establishing those relationships between and among school districts, child care programs, nonprofits. So looking at itinerant services from districts, shared professional development, support for vision, hearing, and developmental screening. It's really inconsistent between and among programs in public schools, child care centers. So the efforts to collaborate and to share resources. Looking at all districts and child cares being enrolled in Delaware STARS, it's optional. So ensuring that all of our districts are choosing to participate. Often our child care programs look to us for, we don't want to say, do what we say, but not what we do. So if we're going to be the role models, then we need to all be enrolled and do the work. Offering before and after care on site in all of our schools and our Head Starts. Ensuring that dental care, so smile check, making sure schools all participate. Ensuring that vision and hearing is available in public pre-K. Making sure that public preschool programs look at licensing and accepting purchase of care. Utilizing a weighted lottery system so peers are able to access programming. Participating on readiness teams. Looking at a lot of the promotion of services. So in our last presentation, we looked at that kind of wraparound, community school partnership. So really systematically making sure that schools and childcare programs are giving families access to information about home visiting, WIC, Dolly Parton Imagination Library, all these kinds of programs that are free and available, making sure families know how to access, that those services are available and then how to access them. Looking at the American Academy of Pediatrics schedule periodicity, so the kinds of screenings, the kinds of interventions that need to be in place earlier in children's lives, and how we ensure that pediatricians follow those recommendations. Ensuring that social emotional learning is part of what we do all day, every day. And then as districts and as early learning programs, we are collaborating with each other. We are cooperating. We are sharing resources and ideas, because we do that intermittently, but we don't systematically share with each other to better utilize our resources. So I'll come back to this feedback, but then what does success look like? Every child in Delaware arrives at kindergarten having had access to all of the developmental, social, health, academic, and related services that are necessary to thrive and succeed. So I tried to do all that within my 10 minutes. So then what I did is I put these screens here for feedback, so I can add information, any feedback that anyone has, or we can just record that as you talk. But we really want the team, our social determinants of health team, to think about other recommendations that could be, what do we recommend as far as policy? What do we recommend as far as regulations, or what legislation do we want to propose now? And then what are additional items that won't take that kind of change? What other recommendations do you have that are changes in mindset, changes in collaboration opportunities?
So the floor is open for folks if they want to just try to jump in, either raise a hand somehow or just kind of start going ahead and sharing your thoughts. Thank you, Dawn, very much. I mean, I know I have a couple.
My pleasure.
I'll let the room speak
Oops.
before I throw my one out.
I have a question.
Sure.
Lisa Edler. I have a question. Do you have anything in place? It was just something that I thought about a while back. I'm an English teacher. Do you have anything in place for parents and children for reading together? And also, as a part of that, for parents who are unable to read, even at a very early level, some reading lessons or classes for literacy lessons for parents?
So there are opportunities through Read Aloud Delaware and I tried to type on this, I'm having some issues. So I'm going to stop my share, but I am going to take the notes and type on there. So Read Aloud Delaware, and actually there are a lot of opportunities through the public library. So there are so many links I wanted to add into this that I didn't, but making sure, so if you go to Delaware Public Libraries, the calendars of what the libraries are offering are posted, and some of our local libraries are offering those opportunities so parents can learn to read, and so parents also learn how to provide the literacy opportunities for children, even if they themselves are not strong readers. So those opportunities are there, and one thing I'm really excited about that I hope that we will do in the future is be able to bring our community partners who are doing this work to our group work, so they can do the almost infomercials of what they're offering, so then we can share this out.
Great.
And that's a lot of what Delaware readiness teams do. And with our readiness teams, there are 19 of them. So with readiness teams, we bring together school districts, childcare partners, nonprofits, I mean, anybody and everybody who's interested in working with young children. We bring those teams together, and everyone is sharing all of the, do you know that I offer this resource? Do you know that we're doing this in the community? And it's a grassroots way to share what we're doing. And what I would love for us to be able to do is take that model and be able to replicate it from birth, up through 12th grade. This real investment in partnering with what's already available out there, making sure that not only parents know that's there, but we as the educators, we have the closest relationship with families, so we have to be able to know what's available. So when families talk to us, we can tell them, this is 5 places that you can go as this resource. Thank
Also,
you.
if you put your email in the chat with PIC, we partnered with DOE this summer, and we sent books and things with activities to read with parents and their children too. So I can get the resources that we sent out for that and have them sent to you as well, if you'd like.
Thanks, Tika. I see Caitlin Gleason has her hand up?
I do. Thank you, Jeffrey. So hi, my name's Caitlin, member of the public. Thanks for having me tonight. I wanted to just also comment that what Dawn was sharing about the holistic approach that we are striving for, a 2-generation approach in our early childhood world, is actually what I was also hearing from the 2 other presentations prior. And the idea of learning from the organization and structure from our school system and our community resource system that could inform improvements in the early childhood world, but vice versa, taking some of the huge strides we've made in equity and inclusion and with our diverse workforce in early childhood, and learning from this concept of how we support families and whole wellness for children, not just academic standards, and move that into a school setting, or instead of just isolating it into a wellness center, but really having a paradigm shift in the way that we're approaching the continuum of care and learning from ages birth all the way up.
Thanks, Caitlin. I don't want to put him on the spot, but I know Jeff Tashner is going to be jumping off to another consortium meeting. If he had anything to add to this conversation before he had to leave. So don't want to call you out, Jeff, but I wanted to give you the opportunity.
No, that's quite right. Nothing in particular. I think everything so far has made an abundant amount of sense. And it's stuff we've all been talking about for a long time. And I just hope we can pull it all together and move it forward.
Great.
I want to add too, because I also am going to be popping over to the funding work group. But one thing that Dawn and I had talked about was communication and communicating with families in the community. And one thing I had mentioned was that if we're trying to reach more families, that we need to be innovative in our ways that we reach them. And so traditional methods have kind of yielded the same traditional people. And so, social media has been a big push, but I had talked about really, we in the past have posted things and waited for the community to come to us, but we really need to go to the community. So whether it's barbershop conversations or other little small ways, but really activating folks. And about 20 years ago, I was involved with several projects in Wilmington that were utilizing asset-based community development. And so I think that's a place where we could really use that tool to push some of the work that we're doing.
Great, thank you. I saw Mike Wilson, I believe, had his hand up. He wanted to say something. Go ahead, Mike.
This is Mike Wilson. I run a nonprofit in downtown Wilmington called PrEP. This year we have 8 early learning centers, including the Stubbs Early Education Center, 250 children. We're putting together right now literacy boxes with things that the teacher knows are in the home, parents know they're in the home. Every month for the school year, we provide 250 children with a free copy of Ranger Rick Jr. magazine after a part of that magazine is read in the classroom. Our point is that we really need to combine the teacher, the child, and the parent or caregiver in the house. I'm going to send updated to Dawn. I mean, Dawn and I know each other for a couple of years. I'll send it to Dawn and then she can share it with the rest of the committee.
Thank you. All right, let's get back. So members of the work group, does anybody have anything to add as we're moving forward to Dawn's presentation?
Yes, this is Kim. If I could just say something.
Please.
So Dawn, thank you so much. You're always has lots of details, so I appreciate your passion. I was just wondering, have you reached out to the Delaware Healthy Mother and Infant Consortium to speak to them about how we could work together with, starting at birth? I served on that consortium for a while. You might want to talk to them. And I agree, as far as services, we have services in DHSS, DOE. We have services in the Christina School District. It's hard for parents to, and this is for just in general, to follow where they go for services or who can help them. And also I would suggest reaching out to the wellness, the strategic plan to talk about wellness centers and the pre-K programs and see if we can get some type of discussion going, or at least have families have access to the wellness centers in some of our schools. Not just the children that go there, but their siblings or, you know, community members. So.
Thank you, Kim. So I'm relatively new to the wellness center conversation and the pre-K conversation, coming in on the heels of Dr. Blakey. Those were two of his, I mean, he carried those charges forward extensively in his tenure as superintendent. And, you know, the meetings that I've been in for the wellness center, one thing that I would add, Dawn, it seems to kind of perpetually come up, and Yvette, I see you sitting there. Sometimes the wellness, there's a lot of conversation with insurance companies when it comes around wellness centers. I feel like while they might not seem like something that you need someone you might need at the table at this stage of grassroots planning, they are a lot of the back of the house funding and wheels that move behind the wellness centers, that I think it might be valuable to bring or find someone from that group. I know that the wellness center group had one from all the large insurers in the state when they were talking about the school-based wellness centers. Most recently, one of the last meetings that I went to before COVID, and even the one that I attended at New Moores, it kind of comes up a lot. So I would just float that out there. I don't have an answer for it, but I know that that's something that's like a little bit of a grease that makes that wheel go really smoother as you move forward.
Thank you.
Any other feedback for Dawn around the early childhood, holistic child development that she can take back to the group? You know, I know, Matt, you've had several conversations with, you know, various folks in the work groups in between session. Do you feel did you want to illuminate or highlight anything that you felt was particularly important?
The only thing I would add, or just in terms of soliciting people's input, is what I had mentioned briefly a little bit earlier, both with respect to all of the recommendations that Dawn talked about, that she identified as ones that did involve new resources, and then the ones that Tamara had outlined. You know, they are things that you know, may involve setting priorities in terms of, you know, what we do first and where they're targeted first. And if people have any thoughts about, you know, how best to try to start figuring that out, that would also be helpful, just in terms of giving them some guidance as they go back and try to add some detail.
Caitlin, did you want to add something?
No, I think that's a really good point around reallocating existing resources. And there's a lot of shifting in the early childhood governance space right now for our state. And so a good opportunity might be to leverage some existing strategic plans or recommendations that are coming out from different groups that were mentioned in this space as well. I just put a little update in the council's plan there. Again, that's not necessarily the state-based plan that we will be developing and can recommend moving forward, but I think that if there's a way to, I guess, piggyback, I hate that word, but leverage, I don't like that word either, elevate certain priorities over others, then I think we should try to do as much as we can to further the work that's happening in the early childhood space already.
Yeah, Caitlin, I kind of struggled with that conversation in the off lane too. Like, I was told, use the word prioritize. That way you don't drop anything off. You don't have,
I'm going to keep that one in mind.
That was a Ray Avery Jones lesson to Jeff Menzer at one moment in time when we were talking about how are we going to talk about the next steps here. And Dawn, I'll let you kind of wrap up your group, your presentation, and any other further feedback, and we'll kind of start talking a little bit about the next steps.
So something I think that's important for all of us to know is that there was legislation that was passed last summer for SCR 65, which was an extensive review of DHSS and looking at services, looking at national best practices. And there are 3 work groups that were working very hard up until COVID hit and came to a screeching halt. So I'm serving on the national best practices work group. I would encourage any of you to, when we look at wellness, healthcare, WIC, TANF, SNAP, you know, anything that DHSS is the lead agency for that impacts our work, You can find all the information on, you can Google SCR65 or you can email me, but everything that's been done thus far is on one website, almost like our Reading Consortium. It's all been saved, and those work groups will begin again in October. So I think of it kind of like a Venn diagram, the overlap of some of the recommendations that we are making. Know that there are people who are working on how can we better ensure that there's access to services for families, how can we make sure that school-based personnel understand how to connect families with services. There's a lot of that work going on with those work groups, and once they restart in October, I can give you more information, but the work groups are making recommendations for legislation, and much of it does relate to the kinds of services that we want our children and families to access. Thank you.
Thank you, Dawn. So as you can see, the folks who were in the small work groups, the breakouts, there was a lot of activity going on between now and the last meeting, where these groups actually kind of just formed at the tail end of that meeting. And, you know, we really, kudos to the work groups for hitting the ground running and really jumping in whole hog. I mean, definitely big claps all the way around. Tamara, Roger, Yasser, and Dawn, and Tika, thank you so much for, you know, jumping into that space and really pushing the ball down the road. I think what we want to continue to focus on is, Dawn, you know, kind of gave a great visual there, the old Venn diagram that we've all grown up with, and, you know, when the overlap is there, how can we smarter use that overlap to all leverage to the same direction as opposed to working against each other? And that is one thing that I think we can all agree is something that is a little bit of a mindset shift, and it is a little bit about re-educating folks around what are the priorities. And so I think with the next steps for the small groups, I think, Matt, you kind of started to touch on it in your last statement. So maybe, like, what's the charge for the groups now? We kind of have a large chunk, and we do need to, like, start prioritizing, but is there how do you think we should be focusing those priorities, and, like, as we move forward, as it relates to the work of the Reading Consortium directly?
Well, I think there's two things for the groups to do between now and the next meeting. Ideally, you know, part of the purpose of them presenting today was to be able to hear back from other working group members. Is there something that was left off this list that ought to be on? Is there something that's on it that doesn't make sense? So they would at least know if they were talking about the right things. So one goal for the next meeting would be to be able to build out on what was presented today, to add some details about how things would work for the things that were identified as involving funding, trying to get some idea about what that might entail. But then part two is what we've just been talking about over the last few minutes, is knowing that we're going to have to, you know, to focus to some degree with some of these recommendations. You know, how do we do that, and where should initially the focus be? So, for example, some of the things Dawn was talking about in terms of new pre-K services and providing, you know, free or very low cost early child care and pre-K services for as many kids as possible before they start kindergarten. To do that for every single child in the state would be an extraordinary expense, but and one that we would like to be able to do at some point. But for the interim, if we are trying to, you know, focus in on students who are facing barriers caused by poverty or race, you know, what's the best way to try to do that effectively? So I think that's also something that hopefully can be a focus between this meeting and the next meeting, and also to the extent that we have any time left tonight, if people have some ideas in that front, you know, to sort of weigh in on that issue as well, how to try to the extent we're talking about doing new things, what's the best way to try to initially focus them where we want them to be focused.
So, Matt, I hate to cut you off, but I want to do something that's really important because I noticed people are popping off. We need to approve the minutes while we still have enough people on the meeting here to approve them from the last time. So can we just do that really quick? Jason, we shared the minutes with everyone. When we do this in a public meeting, do we have to present the minutes publicly, or are we trusting that everyone has reviewed them when you sent them out and that we just seek a motion? So I'm gonna cede the floor to someone who's been in this space a lot more than I have before I make that motion. That's either Matt, maybe Senator Sokola, Senator Williams.
I move that we approve the minutes.
Oh, there we go. That's my answer. Do I hear a second?
I'll second it.
All right. All those in favor?
Aye.
Ayes. All right. Got that done. Check that off the list, Jason. All right. Now, Matt, back to that. The two things for the work groups to be continuing to focus on.
I was done.
Oh, all right. I didn't know if you wanted to restate them for the group because I see Dawn furiously writing, and I don't know if Tamara is, but if you wanted to kind of just recap for us real quick. Two things that we're going to be talking about moving forward with our small work groups.
Yeah, just adding some detail between this meeting and the next meeting, with the ultimate goal of having, a narrative report that we can, present to the consortium in December. But then also trying to figure out where we're talking about spending new resources, how to best target those initially.
Great. And the focus on the barriers that race and poverty present for students. I believe you also mentioned that. Great. All right, so.
Can I just say this, Jeff? And those barriers are not always very explicit. There may be policies or practices that don't afford, I'll use the transportation for after-school curricular activities, that don't afford a transportation plan. And so, by default, kids that are bused away, and we still have a lot of kids that are bused away from home. I mean, when we say busing ended, there are a lot of kids that ride buses that they can't walk to their schools still, particularly at the middle and high school level. And so if there is not a transportation policy that affords every student equal access, then that's a barrier. So some things we're going to have to dig in and tease out.
Yeah, I think that was, Roger definitely brought that forward in his piece, but I think that's probably prevalent through all the presentations, for both of all the work groups. There's going to be those policies and practices that prohibit, access.
So what I'm saying is that we have to be able to identify them.
So make that part of the charge for this next go around.
You might not want to make it for the next go round, but once we say, okay, these are the subset of our priorities. Yep. And this is how our ideas, or these are our ideas around how to target, who to target. Mm-hmm. Then that would be the next step after that. Mm-hmm. Like what and you call them barriers. They are barriers, but sometimes we don't refer to policy and practices as barriers.
Okay. Great.
Could I just interrupt? I'll give you an example of a policy that was a barrier. When I was first elected, the choice law allowed school districts and charter schools to discriminate against kids who had IEPs and 504s. They could turn them down because of those documents.
Yep.
That's a barrier, and that was a policy that was written. And we disbanded that.
Thank you. Pretty.
Right. Thank you for that example, Representative Williams.
Sure.
School choice has a lot of examples.
Yes.
One thing that I did want to note with respect to continuing the conversation, Dr. Lawler, Terry shared an email, and she sent an email to all of us on the work on the whole social determinant work group that I think is just worth noting that she did share it. I want to make sure we draw attention to it. A published study or from NBCDI, National Black Child Development Institute. Being Black is not a risk factor. Just wanted to draw everybody's attention to it, that it's probably sitting in your inbox, in your email. That I just wanted to make sure I passed that along before we move along to kind of start wrapping up with public comment.
And Caitlin did a great set of resources in her most recent email. Not that the other ones weren't great, but I paid more attention, Caitlin. And so we want to get those links out to you all as well. A series of articles written different sources.
Thanks.
Great. All right, and so by my accounts, I mean, I feel that I feel like we're clear on our next steps for the small groups. I would like to give those who are the ones facilitating that conversation one last, if you have any further questions or need any further direction or guidance, please speak up right now and let us know. Otherwise, you know how to reach Matt, Ray, or myself moving forward. But just give one more opportunity.
Yeah, and there's still an opportunity to connect with one of these three groups.
Yep. If you're on this call right now and you're a member of the social determinant work group and you haven't kind of fallen into line with kind of getting involved, there's plenty of opportunities in either one of the work groups. Good point, right? That said, I'm not one to just fill time because we said the meeting goes till 6:30. I would like to open up the official public comment forum. Jason, did you get any email, any chats from anyone? We did have public speaking, so that maybe we kind of broke the protocol a little bit there, but like, do we have any public comments, Jason?
Nobody indicated in the chat that they wanted to speak, but if we want to give them like 15 seconds to indicate so or speak up,
yep,
I'm cool with that.
Any other members of the public here who'd like to chime in or share a comment or share a reflection on what you saw this evening, please feel free.
This is Caitlin. Thank you for letting me speak earlier. I'm just excited that we're thinking about these different topics holistically and how they're combined as opposed to isolating them in separate priorities and recommendations, because I think what I heard from recommendations from the groups very much aligned to each other for a positive experience, not just for children, and helping them see their autonomy and authority in their own care and learning, but also how parents can then be educated in that respect as well.
Thank you, Caitlin.
Thank you, Caitlin. So there is another work group, the funding work group. What time is their meeting started? 6:30?
No, they started at 5 too, I think, and ended. They're ending at 6:32 because I'm on that one as well.
Okay, well, is there a motion to adjourn? Gotta follow the money.
Motion to adjourn.
Do I have a motion to adjourn?
Motion to adjourn.
Any second?
All right.
Second.
Good night.
All right.
Thank you for your hard work.
Thank you all.
Dawn,
Take
Tamara,
care,
and
everyone.
Professor.
See you. Wait, October 29th. Make sure you're paying attention. That's our next meeting. Jason will get the minutes out from this, and we'll keep the ball rolling out of the meeting. So take care, all.
Okay. Bye-bye.
See you guys.
See you.